Hello everyone, and welcome to another Maximum Code tutorial. We hope you're safe and weathering these difficult times. In this tutorial, we're going to learn how to manage images and view them with a cross-platform desktop application. This tutorial is split in two sections. In the first section, we're going to create a cross-platform desktop app to view images. In the second section, we will review how to work with images using the Microsoft System.Drawing as well as C#. We looked at all the frameworks that were out there, and we wanted to use a framework that we could code once and have no additional UIs for each platform. In the end, we selected AvaloniaUI. During our search, we learned that Microsoft is also planning on releasing a cross-platform desktop framework. The Microsoft cross-platform, called MAUI, won't be available until later this year, and even then it won't be production ready. AvaloniaUI is free and open source. We could have also used Unity game engine for a cross-platform UI, but we will be doing game development once we learn the C# language. A lot of companies have used Unity engine for mobile apps and not just for games because it's cross-platform features and it can be deployed to any device. AvaloniaUI uses an MVVP pattern. Since we haven't learned any patterns or object-oriented programming, we will use the AvaloniaUI framework and deal with its events just as you would in Windows Forms. There is some aspect of this that you will use asynchronous programming. C# has async and await keywords, and we will learn just enough to get us going. Async and await features require a dedicated tutorial, and we'll address this in advanced topics of our tutorial section. AvaloniaUI has a Visual Studio extension, and it is intended for Windows only. The Visual Studio extension will work, and you can create projects or for AvaloniaUI and use the designer to view your controls. Again, this is for Windows only. If you have Visual Studio on a Mac, the extension is not available. The AvaloniaUI uses a XAML, which stands for Extensible Application Markup Language. If you work with WPF, then you should be familiar because it's based on that format. If not, don't worry, we'll go over a few bits and pieces of it to get us started. So let's go ahead and create a new project with the extension we just installed in Visual Studio. We'll select the desktop, and then as you can see, we now have two projects. We have the MVVM pattern and the Avalonia application, which we'll be using. So as you can see, we now have two packages, Avalonia and the Avalonia desktop. and we're using .NET Core 3.1. If we navigate to AvaloniaUI GitHub site, we can see that there are many community samples that you can use as a resource. So if you get stuck trying to create your own UI, download the sample and see how they were being built, and you can use those to enhance the application that you're working on. So another tool you could use is Avalonia Studio. This is a platform where you can develop applications with Avalonia Studio using the UI instead of using Visual Studio. But for our example, we're gonna stick with Visual Studio. We just wanted to show you this tooling, that it is available and it is cross-platform. AvaloniaUI is a fully functional product that you can use in your production environment, and as you can see, the IL Spy is built using AvaloniaUI. If you download IL Spy on any platform, you have the same consistent UI across Mac, Ubuntu, and Windows. So let's take a look at one of the samples. We'll download it as a zip file, then copy it to our temp directory. When you open it with Visual Studio, make sure to set the correct project as a startup. There are 3 projects here. Control Catalog is where all the controls reside. The other 2, NetFX is for .NET Framework, which is for Windows only. And the .NET Core is the cross-platform that can run on Windows, Linux, and Mac. Let's view some of the samples by running the application. Now let's run it on Ubuntu. As you can see, we have the same controls, but it is running in Ubuntu, and it's the same code, and there's no different UI or anything for it. So now let's take a look at this and see how it looks on a Mac. Again, same thing. Alright, let's get into our tutorial and start building an image viewer. Let's talk about what images are first. There are two types of images, bitmaps, or some call them raster, and vectors. Bitmaps are made of square boxes called pixels. Let's see this in Photoshop, but you can use any image editor or paint program to be able to do the same thing, even Microsoft Paint. As you zoom in on the image, you can see that the image is made of small square boxes that contain one color. Vector images are not pixel based, and they are actually mathematical formulas. So if you're displaying a shape, it's based on a math formula. No matter how much you zoom in, you will see no pixels, but rather the math formula that makes up that part of the shape. Generally, bitmaps are suitable for photographs or drawings that contain many ranges of color. Vector art is for logos, types, and simple art. Although in today's technology, using Illustrator or other tools, many artists can use vector art that looks very realistic. So let's go ahead and use our Visual Studio in Windows and create a Avalonia project. So this project will be our base for the image viewer. Let's go ahead and test, make sure that we can launch it. Let's go ahead and change the default label that you saw to a button. So now if we run the program, we can see that the button is actually taking the whole window space. Let's update this so that it only takes a specific space within the form. We'll put a width and a height. And now if we run it, we'll see that the button has specific properties. But the button doesn't do anything, so what we need to do is display an action when the user clicks the button. To do this, we're gonna add another attribute. In the attribute, we actually named a value, and that value is going to be the actual event that needs to be fired. So this is the signature that the Avalonia framework expects when you're wiring the event. Next, within the method, we're gonna go ahead and use the sender and cast it as a button, and then update the button text to display a message. So everything we just showed you is actually documented in Avalonia's website and their documentation. So you can either follow along with these examples that they have if you want to do something more advanced or something different. And so now let's go back to our tutorial and kind of see how the layouts will work. Let's add another control, a text box, and notice that we get an error when we try to compile. This is due to the window requiring only one control. So the way AvaloniaUI works is that you have one parent control and then you have other child controls inside of that. So to do this, we have to use a layout control and then add our other controls inside of that. Let's think about what the UI would look like for our image viewer. So we need to have a menu command to open an image, and it must be docked at the top of the window. Next, we need a main area to show the image, which will be the middle part. And then for this example, we'll use a stack panel. All controls inside of it will be, as the name states, stacked, one on top of each other. Next, we'll implement the Open Menu event click. Notice that the code hangs as we try to open a file dialog. Now, we mentioned that we're going to be going over asynchronous programming, and this is the reason why this is not working. This is happening because we blocked the UI thread. To solve this, we will make the method asynchronous. To do this, we add the async keyword to the signature of the method. Now, for every asynchronous method, we need to use at least one await keyword. With these changes, our code is working as expected. We can get the file name for our image, and then the dialog that we're using is the Windows dialog. So when we're executing this in Ubuntu or Mac, we would have to use the OS implementation of the file dialog for that, and the application will not quite look the same. So what we can do is use the AvaloniaUI internal dialog. So that will be across Ubuntu, Mac, and Windows. It will be the same dialog that opens up. Let's see how we can make the changes to our application and use the native Avalonia dialog instead of the OS dialog. We'll keep the Avalonia dialog as they are, uniform across all platforms. Now let's add code to load the image. We should also add a try catch because we may have issues with the file being blocked, or we may not have permission to open the file. If we do nothing and use the image control, the image is resized by default. We can also change this behavior and add features to use to scroll if the image is too large for the screen. If you like to zoom in and out, there are folks who have created a NuGet package for this. So you can do a quick Google search and you'll find this. So now we have a pretty nice image viewer that is cross-platform. Let's take a look at this and see what it looks like in other in Ubuntu and Mac. So it looks like we generated an exception. That's why the dialog didn't open. Let's look at the debug and see what caused the issue. So we're getting a null reference. And looking at the stack trace, let's see where it's breaking out. So if you look at that very first line, we are trying to set a title, passing a string with the title, and that's where the execution is failing. So it looks like we have to set the title for the window dialog in order for this to work. That's it for this tutorial, and in our next video we will go over how to work with images, resizing, and doing other things with them. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next video.